let's talk about the offense. This is a Chiefs offense that has been a little bit underwhelming throughout the season, especially an offense where Andy Reid is the play caller and head coach, where Patrick Mahomes, who may be the greatest to ever do it as far as physical traits and everything he brings to the game, playing the quarterback position. Yet this offense ranked, I believe, 10th in points per game, which isn't bad by any means, but by their standards is much lower than what you would expect. They've had a good offensive line. Some of the weapons haven't been all that great. There's been some injuries and what have you. But one thing they have done is they've turned it on a little bit in the playoffs. Now, the Ravens game, they only scored 17, but that was the best scoring defense in the NFL. Other than that, they've put up some points in the first two games. What do you see as the biggest difference between the Chiefs' offense when it came to the playoffs versus what we saw in the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like they're a lot more locked in, and it's kind of funny. It seems like some of the players, especially Patrick, have pointed to that. Is it's like, after such a rough regular season, then the playoffs came along, and their whole attitude kind of just changed. And so it didn't really surprise me all that much. I think I saw, maybe it was an Andy Reid interview where they said that the Raiders' loss on Christmas was kind of the turning point. That was kind of the low point of the season for them. And after that point on, the team really just said, we got to be better. And they really have. And it's pretty remarkable how they have turned it on in the postseason. I wasn't too surprised against the Dolphins. We beat them in the regular season. So, I was confident, and we beat them even more than we did then. And the Bills, I was very nervous about the Bills. We did it, though. The Chiefs did it, and they pulled through. And then you did mention the Ravens. They only scored 17 points. Yeah, that one was such a weird game because it is kind of overlooked, but they didn't score any points in the second half, which usually isn't a good thing. But anyone who watched that game, didn't feel like the offense really had any problems, though. It was kind of just one of those weird things where, they were moving the ball up and down the field the whole game. They just didn't get in the end zone in the second half. So there wasn't a whole lot of nervousness, are we regressing to what we were in the regular season? So yeah, just kind of one of those weird things, but I'm glad they've turned it on, and I'm excited to see what they do in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the Chiefs, I agree with that wholeheartedly, by the way. And looking at this offense and the way that they've turned it on and seemingly fixed all of their issues is interesting. It kind of begs the question of, okay, how much of this was young players? How much of this was them kind of playing coy all season? I don't know. I mean, not that is it, but gosh, man, it almost seems like it the way they've turned it on. And the most impressive thing I would say about the Chiefs, offense, defense, everything all in, none of these playoff games have been in doubt. They had to play at home in frigid weather. Yep. Then they had to go on the road in two very tough environments against elite quarterbacks. And they've just showed out every time through. And none of the games were ever in doubt. There was never a thought of when these games started of, oh my gosh, the Chiefs might lose. Here it is, the end of this run. It never has happened, which is insane to think about for an offense, especially an offense that really hasn't had it together all season, from drops to turnovers to just being out of sync, the frustration with Kelsey and Mahomes on the sidelines and Andy Reid and the whole thing. It's as if it never happened once the playoffs started. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it reminds me of, everyone likes to compare the Chiefs now to the Patriots of the last 20 years. But, we used to with the Patriots, people would say, oh, they just they sleepwalk through the regular season and then they get into the postseason and they turn on. That's really how the Chiefs have been. And this year is no different, is they just kind of sleptwalk through the regular season. And now here they are. And you're right. I'll be honest with you. I didn't think we'd win the Ravens game. I predicted them to lose. Yeah. I predicted them to lose. And right up until the end, I still thought the Ravens were going to come back. And, but man, the resiliency that this Chiefs team has shown. And I think I wrote a story about it for Arrowhead Addict, but the redemption of MVS there at the end, that single catch at the end of the game to seal it. I mean, it really just flipped everything from this previous season on its head. and it basically was like, yep, you know what? That's all in the rearview mirror. We're here and we're dominant again. Always have been, maybe. you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this question is a good one, kind of parlaying off the topic here. Cryptic says Chiefs ended the season 11-6, up and down season. What do you think has led to their success? Have the young receivers found themselves? Any cause for concern going into the Super Bowl that old habits might return versus San Francisco? So let's go first thing. You kind of talked about their success a little bit, but do you feel like the young receivers have kind of found themselves, or just the receiving core in general? You talked about MVS, who's not young, but do you just feel like the receiving core has kind of found itself and figured it out? Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I do. I think Rashee Rice has really grown into his own in this offense. I mean, I remember the first couple weeks of the season, everyone was getting really nervous on him because he was having drops, just like all the other receivers were having drops. But as the season progressed, Andy stuck with him, and thankfully they did, because he's really matured. And as a player, I mean, as a rookie, his growth was phenomenal. And he ended the season almost with 1,000 yards, I think. And so the fact that he came along that far, and then in these playoffs, man, he's just been on fire, you know. And so I think that's the big one, is the receivers have just grown a lot. And, you know, the biggest thing is I don't think they ever lost confidence in themselves, which is really surprising, because there were a couple moments, I'm not going to lie, a couple moments in the regular season where I felt like Patrick did kind of lose confidence with them. And there's frustration. You know, we had that one game where he just blew up on everybody. And there's a lot of frustration there, but you know what? They stuck with it, and they kept getting better. And now here they are, and the offense seems to be running just fine.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say, and Andy Reid's offense definitely has a lot of this built into it. Every offense does to a certain extent in the NFL, but I know Andy Reid's offense in particular has a lot of this built in, where depending on what you're reading in the coverage, routes can change a little bit. You know, routes can be flattened out versus, you know, kind of staying vertical. And depending on how a receiver, and a young receiver in particular, is reading the coverage, that might be different than what Patrick Mahomes is reading. And so you may see a throw that's bad, but it's not necessarily Patrick Mahomes' fault. Or you got a receiver that's expecting the ball somewhere else because they read the coverage different than Patrick. And what you're seeing, I think, is these young receivers, or just these receivers in general, but Rashee Rice being a young receiver, rookie year, kind of starting to figure it out and read things the way that Patrick Mahomes does. And I think that is also playing into maybe the lack of drops and those other things. But the second part of this question was, is there any cause for concern as a Chiefs fan going into this Super Bowl that old habits might return versus San Francisco?
I don't think so. I did kind of think about that today, actually. Like, what could we see this offense regress? I guess the possibility is always there, but man, it's just the way they've been the last 3 games in the playoffs. It's just hard to imagine that they would just go all the way back and have those issues. Now, granted, at the end of the Ravens game, we saw the second half they didn't score any points, so that, you know, on paper is concerning. But again, watching that game, you never really felt like there was an issue with the offense. They did like have less and less plays each time they punted, but overall it was like they were still getting yardage. So I don't know. I think the biggest thing is that I don't think any of the receivers had any drops in that game, which was like, you know, the biggest thing everyone was waiting for is like, okay, where's the drop going to come from? And they didn't. And so I think that just shows that altogether they've all matured. And no, I don't think they're going to go back. And even if they do, our defense is stepping up to the plate like they have all season, and really kept us in this. So, yeah.